Thank you, Haile. That's for folks who are here all the time. You know that Haile and Shriek are here all the time, but even for folk who are here all the time, you know that's kind of a rare thing for him to come at the beginning. So that's for you, brother. He usually comes at the end and blows it up. So he may come back for that, I suspect. Well, welcome everybody. It's all right. You can say yeah. Welcome. We are here with, among so many other things. Should I start with the dean of education on Black Twitter? That's what many people know this brother as. Brilliant work just with the fingers. And also, you may know him from his work with the Griot, with Guardian. You may have seen him on CNN or MSNBC or writing in the Washington Post, New York Times. That podcast, Drapetomaniacs, Fire. I don't know if any of y'all know that podcast. Yes, absolutely. And just overall, a towering intellectual who, I think it was Stanley Kraft said that Jack Johnson's genius is the ability to make the difficult things seem simple. And if you think it's easy, try it. Not gonna happen. Everybody's here to see you today. Professor Michael Harriot. Can we have a... Proud is the honor. You know that Black AF has been adopted in college classrooms. You also have a separate, course of study that has been adopted on race and economics at different places. Maybe you'll talk a little bit about that. If you don't mind, before we get into Black AF and the structure and where the title comes from, the 16 chapters, the various drop-ins you have, including the stuff on food and the bios, everything beautiful. We know that I think it's 233 years ago, day before yesterday, Cecile Fatimon and Boukman Dutty jumped off the Haitian Revolution. And you got a section in here, Fear of a Black Nation, brother. On the anniversary, which the United Nations now recognizes as the day for the recognition of not only the slave trade, but the trade in enslaved Africans, but its abolition. You mind saying a few words on the occasion? The UN recognizes that day, starting in Haiti, but you wrote about that. So maybe set the occasion for us, brother, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I thought, so to me, the Haitian Revolution has always held a special place in all of our history because it, first of all, it's really the only thing in this book that does not take place on American soil. Have you noticed, right? That's how important it is, right? And it shows you the world's reactions to our freedom and what we are able to do just in our imagination and our desire for freedom alone, right? And it also, to me, is instructive of what is required to free oneself of a system that is not even as complex as ours, right? But
that's right.
The kind of resolve, the kind of willingness to sacrifice oneself, the kind of intellect, and the fact that when you combine all of that together, the opposition, just a few ragtag people with nothing but the imagination and the desire of freedom, defeated a collection of all of the greatest armies in the Western world. Not successively, but combined together. And so I think that was instructive, and that's why it's in this book.
Thank you, brother. And it's a beautiful way to start it off. One of your key gifts is to tell a story that we think we know in a way that we don't realize until we're deep into the story that it's the story we thought we knew. You even do that with Toussaint Louverture,
right?
The way you narrate him. You mind saying a word about that? Because we know the name Toussaint Louverture, but you didn't drop Toussaint on us at first.
Right. Right. Because, I mean, when you think about it, Toussaint Louverture is a name that white people gave him.
Yes.
That we know after the fact. But the idea, one of the things that I think it is important to realize is, with all of these historical figures, the way Black historical figures are usually framed, are brave, strong, fearless, And it is important to realize that bravery and fearlessness is important, but that alone cannot defeat anything without the combination of the superior intellect that all of these people displayed, right? He was a master strategist, right? Again, to defeat, like he fooled the greatest military minds in the world. He did it while coalescing disparate groups of people under one idea, right? He did it in multiple languages. And those are the things that are important. Like when we think of these stories and how they are framed to us, a lot of times it's framed in a way that makes the people heroic, but in a very narrow and specific way that doesn't grant them their full humanity. They get a little bit of braveness that people can relate to, or a little bit of courage, or muscular strength, or physical ability that we can relate to, but not the full breadth of the intellect, the humanity, the caringness, the ability to deal with people, the social intelligence that is required of a leader who people who are at their most desperate point will say, I will listen to you and your reason and follow you and put my life in your hands. And I think that, to me, telling our stories in that full breadth of humanity is real important.
No question. Clearly. All right, so how many people have either read or acquiring today to read, or have heard of this book, Black AF History? I see all these hands. Right, there we go. Right. This book now, over the arc of a year, of course, New York Times bestseller. But we know that sometimes people like the Heritage Foundation will buy 1 million copies of a book and it shoots to the top of the list and ain't nobody read it. This is in a different category. Our people are reading this,
right.
And tonight what we'll do is we'll be in conversation some, and if it's all right with you, we're just gonna open it up so people can.
Yeah,
is that all right?
definitely.
Very good. And so that having been said, I'll ask a few questions, but the first one I'd like to ask you, the way you write about this, the title, the concept predated this book. You brought that to the table. Could you talk a little bit about where the concept of Black AF comes from?
So I used to teach a class. As a matter of fact, it was a funny thing, right? I used to work at Benedict College, and a student who was at Benedict College ran into me.
Really?
In here, it's in right
Benedict.
Here, in the back.
Oh, these niggas. Oh, that's Alvin. Alvin be everywhere, man. That's yeah.
So
them South Carolina, South Carolinians had to come, man. You gonna talk about South Carolina?
I also taught a class called Race as an Economic Construct. And so instead of talking about the idea of race through history and social theory, I wanted to talk about it through economic theory. And not when I say economics, it doesn't mean money. The laws of supply and demand, how scarcity informs how people are treated and how it creates a racial construct. And so I was going to write a book about it. I wrote a book proposal about it and took it out to publishers. And every publisher loved the idea, and every single one said, yeah, but what about that history thing you do on Twitter?
Oh, wow.
And
interesting.
So my agent, who is a black woman, so she knows how to take advantage of the opportunity, said, you got to go back and write another quick proposal. Well, a lot of people don't know this about me. For years, even before you even knew of me as a writer, I had been performing and writing as a poet.
Yes.
And one of the things you do as a poet, because there ain't no money in poetry, is you sell merchandise. You sell CDs, you sell t-shirts, and I would sell Black AF t-shirts. Before the show Black AF came out, like they had literally called me to get permission to say, like, somebody already owns this brand. And so when they said, hey, what about that history thing you do? I wanted to do a Black AF history, a version of history that was not centered not just not centered around whiteness, but didn't bother deconstructing the ideas of whiteness and says, it wasn't like this, it was like this. No, I didn't want to do that. I want to say, here's how it would sound if we were telling these stories. Like if your uncle lived through the Haitian Revolution or through the Stonewall Rebellion, how would they tell that story? Right? Like what would you, or how would you have heard that story? Right? It would have been funny, even though it was trash, it would have been funny, it would have been, they would have told you about, that was one of the smartest people I know, like that, and then they would have made fun of the people who oppressed them, and so that's how I wanted to do it, right? Like, accurately, well-researched, but in the way that we communicate with each other.
Man, so maybe we can stay in that vein, because your family is all through this book. I think it's in chapter 1 on Earth, Wind, and Fire. Your uncle opens it up, and you're in dialogue at different places of the book with your family members. Could you maybe talk a little bit about not only how important family is to you, but how important roots are to you, South Carolina in particular, and as you open this book with that voice at the center, the voice of your family, the voice to reach everybody, the person who comes to mind, different but similar in this vein, as a working journalist, somebody who's writing weekly, and then every day on Twitter, the name that came to my mind in terms of your process is someone who would be alien to all of that in terms of technology, but in terms of consistency and writing to and in the voice of the people, another working journalist from 2 generations ago, Lerone Bennett, who did it in Ebony, and then wrote the books out of what he was doing regularly. How important to your process is family communicating to us in a way that we get and understand, and translating in a way so that we get all the history we need, but we get it in a way that's familiar to us. At the same time, we're learning something we didn't know.
Well, so let's start with family, right? Like, my family framed the way I understand the world, right? So not just because we are all framed by our upbringing, right? But my intellectual growth came from me being in a family that says, 1, it is important, and 2, you're going to learn it. Like, they basically raised me in a bubble where my intellectual identity and the identity of myself and my people was not stained by whiteness. So to me, blackness is not in opposition to whiteness. It is not a thing. So I was homeschooled in a home where books were everywhere.
Tell us about that middle room in particular.
Right. And so the middle room in our home, it was essentially what would be a den, was just lined with shelves. And so every generation of my family, my grandfather built that home. And every generation would just leave their books there. The books that my uncle, so I read Lerone Bennett Jr.'s book when I was a child before the Mayflower, right? So that was my history book though, right? So I did, because I was homeschooled, I didn't have, it wasn't competing with George Washington, and that was the history book that I learned.
What was the name of the school you went to?
Who? Me? I was homeschooled.
I know.
Right.
But you put a name in here because you said it's your mother. You said you didn't write this book.
Yes.
Your mama wrote this book.
Right.
What'd you call the school? You and your siblings.
The Dorothy Harriot School for Dorothy Harriot's Children.
Yeah.
That's good. So that's her, she named it that, right? Because we used to try to convince her to let us go to school. You go to school. You go to the Dorothy Harriot School for Dorothy Harriot's Children. And so...
y'all should have shirts, man. Y'all need a mascot.
So that upbringing, being in a black neighborhood, being homeschooled, it insulated me from a competing identity of myself that saw me as, I don't know really, right? Because I don't know how, my identity had already been formed, so I wasn't concerned about how other people would see me. When I actually interviewed my mom for this book, and I had never asked her why she homeschooled us, and she told me an interesting quote. She said, "I didn't think a black child's humanity can be fully realized in the presence of whiteness." So, but I just found that out like 2 years ago, like when I was interviewing her for the book. So, to me, right, she wasn't just, she had really kind of reverse engineered a way that she wanted her children to be. And that's the way, it was normal to me, right? Like it was, like, you wait. So I was telling, I was eating lunch with my friends earlier, and I was, we were talking about, our upbringings, and I said, well, my mom had a court in her house. Like, she allowed before we got into trouble, anything we knew we were going to get in trouble for, before she handed down a punishment, we got a chance to argue our case. We would have actual court cases. And she would issue written decisions. This is why I did it, and this is what your punishment will be. Well, that, for years I thought, like, that was a brilliant way to teach us how to reason and about logic. And then, like, This American Life, the podcast, did an episode on my family's court. And it turns out my mom was like, no, I just like court cases. Like, I used to just like judge shows. So I was like, well, Mom, let my children do one. And that's how it started. But that upbringing created a way for the way I view the world was not in relation to the way I view my community, was not in relation to something else. It just is. We are, like, to me, we are the sun and everything else revolves around us. And in reality, it does.
That's right.
And we have been kind of convinced that, no, there's another sun that we revolve around, and it is not that way.
Yes, sir. Keeping in that then, what makes Black AF history different than all these other books that are critiquing America or saying you left us out of the history? I'm thinking about that early story you tell about them sleeves and the jacket. And saying this book is the sleeves. What
Right.
is that? I mean,
I think a lot of people, there are a lot of works that are corrective histories or histories that they think have been, overlooked or left out. And that's not what I want to do. There are some things in this book that, hadn't been put into the public record, but for the most part, so there are two premises in this book, right? One of them is not just that, there's a history that you haven't been taught. One of them, the thing I specifically want to do is to tell the world, if you learn history from the aspect of Boston and Philadelphia and New York, from that upper East Coast, if there is such a thing as Black America, then that is the capital of Black America, South Carolina. Yes, so sir. I wanted to firmly create a universe where South Carolina was the center, because I don't think people know how important it is to our history. And the other thing the thing I wanted most to do with this book is to tell our story, again, to us, without the interference of that outside narrative. I wanted to tell it, first of all, when you come into this book, I don't want you to think of all of that stuff you ever learned. Let me tell you really what happened, right? And so it's not competing or filling in the blanks or anything else. This is just some of our story, and here's how it's going to be told, right? And it's the truth, it's unvarnished, it's unfiltered, but it ain't the alternative version. It's just our history.
Yes. Okay, now we have the kind of grand tour. You set the spine for us here now. Some of these Negroes who live their lives these ways could have been called crazy. Chapter 5, Drapetomaniacs. What is a Drapetomaniac, brother?
So in 1852, doctor, an actual doctor named Samuel Cartwright, came up with a theory, came up with two actual theories. One was that black people who their desire for freedom was a mental illness called Drapetomania, based on the Greek word for called draptos, or slave or escaped slave, and mania, a crazy person or a type of mental illness. And until like the 1920s, this was in the an actual medical diagnosis. So even after slavery ended, people would still be diagnosed with Drapetomania. You could find newspaper articles that say like, Marcus Garvey, the Drapetomaniac, right? Like they were it was a mental illness. Like there were some people so crazy that they were obsessed with this idea of freedom. And I wanted to take that and look at who would be throughout history Drapetomaniacs, right? Like the people who they would call crazy because they wanted to be free. And so that's where that came from. And really, isn't that all of us, right?
Yeah, no question. Well, we would aspire to that anyway. Some of us lose our nerve. You thread through this book some very important landmark figures. Would it be too much to call you a Du Bois man? You're writing about what you call construction, not reconstruction.
Yeah.
Talk some.
So I think I don't know a person who is seriously intellectually involved in the history of black people who the first person they will bring up isn't Du Bois.
Not Du Bois, to make the point.
Du Bois, right? And I think, so I've had this argument with people, like, is he the most brilliant mind that America has ever created? There is an argument for it, right? There is, I don't know who else would be second, but I mean, you talking about somebody who was a critic of, Reconstruction and, slavery and the slave trade, and a critic of nuclear proliferation.
Yes.
Right? Who essentially created what we now know as sociology. Right? Like the way we use data to examine social structures, Du Bois started that, right? A historian, the founder of the NAACP, intellectual giant, a person who used data to explain the way the world works. And so when you, and the other thing is, after you give all of those credentials, you have to realize when he lived, right? He was a lot, Du Bois died the day before the March on Washington. We like to think of him as way back in the slavery time. Right. He was alive when my mama was alive.
No question.
Right? And so
That's right.
to me, he is that thread. He explained to formerly enslaved people what this world was. He explained during the Red Summer what these people were doing. He explained at the birth of HBCUs what we should be doing. He explained, all the way through history, Absolutely. He was not just documenting, but he was helping create the blueprint going forward.
Absolutely. This is, I'm going to ask a couple more and then folk get ready because I'm going to jump in because we got a lot of books to sign. You're going to sign till your hand fall off tonight. Don't leave no books back there on that table. So just let y'all know. Man, your description of Du Bois like that makes me want to ask a question I'm going to save. Maybe a couple more about figures you highlight and moments you highlight so that, there are figures in here like Robert Charles, who a lot of people don't know. Mm-hmm. When you start talking about black folk who not only shot back, but scared the hell out of the whole country, that kind of thing. Ada Wells, who you position very prominently. Would you say she had, IDGAF disease or something?
That was a genetic marker.
Genetic marker. but in that period that we probably all are the most familiar with, because it's the one considered the most perhaps neutered in recent memory, the so-called civil rights era. You pull one name out and say the names we know, the Martin Luther Kings and all, the Ralph Abernathy's and all, but there's one name you say she's the most important one of all, and that's Ella Jo Baker. Do you mind saying a few words about her?
Yeah. So like a lot of so we first have to start off with a lot of our heroes, our civil rights heroes, most of them were what we call now misogynists, right? And then because the way the world was, right? Like we got to say where the world was, but like the way men were, right? A woman could not have led the civil rights, what we call the civil rights struggle. But what is interesting about that statement is why. Like the women were there and women were ready to, women would have followed her. And what's interesting is the men knew she was winning. Like she was the one to go to get the ideas, right?
That's right.
And so
That's right.
So Ella Baker, so it first of all, many like at the kind of nexus of the civil rights movement, and at this crucial point, right? Like basically everyone comes together in North Carolina and says, like, what is this thing going to be? That with this movement, what is it going to be? What are we going to do? How are we going to frame it? And like everybody that you know, that John Lewis was there, and all these young HBCU students from HBCUs in North Carolina were there, like Jim Clyburn, like all of these people were there, and they said, what is this thing going to be? And there was this generation like Martin Luther King and all of this who said, this is how we're going to confront it. And then there were these young people that said, yeah, but that, you know, I don't think that's going to work for these people. And how are we going to bridge this impasse? And Ella Baker was the person who translated that oh, y'all ain't come up with nothing new, young people, right? And then they were telling the old people, like, at some point y'all have to move out the way because they ready. You got soldiers, you just got to know how to use them. And these are the tactics that you should do. And translating that, like, a nonviolent resistance is not nonviolence, it's not fear, right? But, right, at some point it's got to be resistance from something. And her and another Amelia Boynton is, I mean, not as prominent a role, but you're talking about someone who like sent her son to college, and that's the reason why interstate transportation.
Right. Somebody said it. That's right. Howard Law School. You come home from Howard.
Right, from Howard.
Right.
And
one versus Virginia, y'all know in Virginia, the DeSaid case, right? That's
right, right, was her son, and she organized the march from Selma to Montgomery, and like so.
Oh, wait a minute, and didn't you say she also sent them to interview the sister?
Right.
We talk about Barracoon.
So, a few years ago, you remember Zora Neale Hurston, who is my favorite writer. She came out with the book Barracoon. So I wrote about it and say, well, most people don't know that there was a group of enslaved people who some white men made a bet and smuggled some enslaved people into America, and when they got found out, they burned the ship. And that group still lives in a place called Africatown, Alabama. Well, I was like, well, y'all know, like, there is Amelia Boynton found one of the descendants, and she found a translator for her and put her on film. And the USDA contacted me, like read the thread or something on Twitter, and contacted me and said, like, we have that film, like, wow, we can digitize it. In like 2 days, they put it up. So you can go see, like, the last woman who came here on a slave ship. You can go online and see her and hear her talk, and that's because Amelia Boynton was not only the woman who planned to send summons to Montgomery marches and desegregated buses, but she was also a USDA agent who went around and, first of all, she subjected herself to the violence of, they used to have the literacy tests where you have to learn the Constitution. So she taught herself that, registered to vote, and then would go around teaching people, like, this is how you pass this literacy test. Right? Like, so these black women kind of, like the chapter is the black women who, started the civil rights movement. Because it was like black dudes who had some nice suits and were eloquent and great thinkers and all of that. But a lot of what they used were the ideas that these women gave them because of the world that they lived in and because of their dedication to their people.
So the question the question I had in mind, but then when you start talking about Du Bois and the way you did, I think it really kind of shifted a little bit. But this book, as you say, the Haitian Revolution, the one major conversation you have that takes place outside the United States. We just passed the Democratic National Convention. We all saw, of course, Kamala Harris and Vice President accept the nomination for Democrats. But you don't put, when you say America in here, I think you might mean something different than what we typically think of as America. You say, this is our story, this is us, we survived. Even the whole chapter on reparations, when you're writing about that, thinking about us. How do you imagine the relationship of black people to America? Is this two different things? Or, what's the relationship between black people and America?
Well, most of the time when I say America, I mean, and especially in this book, I mean like the black people who are living inside the boundaries of on the map. But like, there was never any intention for us to be part of the project that they call the United States of America.
That's right.
What this community is a different thing than was ever intended for this country.
Absolutely.
But I don't know, I can't make up a word for it, right? So I call it Black America sometimes, I call it African America sometimes. Sure. But like, people often ask me, like, well, do black people love America? What's their relationship with America?
You got a quote in here. I hope you say it. I don't want to find it, because you said something about, if you love America, you crazy. Anyway, go ahead. You gonna make me, I don't write my books, but I'm gonna have to find it.
Somebody once asked me that, and I was like, I don't know what that means. Right? Like, what do I love? The people inside this boundary more than I love the people outside the boundary? That's a crazy thing, right? Or do I love the dirt or the land or the roads and the trees and the sky above? Which is like, that is a crazy thing, right? Like, and the idea of America, the freedom and liberty, freedom and justice and liberty, and Star Spangled Banner, like, we ain't never had none of that. So I don't understand what loving America is. Yes. I love black people. I love people, and I do not want the things that black people have given to each other and to me for our survival and success and for this country to thrive, to ever be dismissed or ignored. But I don't know if that love is for the stars and stripes and the people who drop bombs. And like, no one can ever explain what loving America is. And usually it comes down to the original idea that excluded me. So what is America is the question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I guess for each of us, it's an individual thing, right? But I was coming through the airport this morning, and this is what I love, though. I was coming through the airport this morning, and it was like, I don't know what race the people were. It was brown people and black people and white people. And I love that. And that ain't never what they wanted America to be.
Facts.
So what I love
Facts.
is the opposite of America,
Yes,
maybe.
sir. Yes,
What
sir.
was the opposite of the original recipe America,
Yes, sir.
right? But I love that, the thing, and whatever you say, like if you love the freedom and the country and democracy and all of that, what you love is something black people imagined and made it into reality. Because it was not a democracy.
That's right.
It was like women couldn't vote, like it was a place that was an aristocracy until we said nah. And we didn't have, like, and we did it, what is crazy is that we did it without, like, of the power to vote, our full humanity, like, less education. Nothing but our, like, the power of our imagination created a thing that did not exist and made it exist. And I guess that is the thing that I love.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, Spike, since we ain't going nowhere, and since it's clear that white supremacy has probably peaked in some ways, they may tear the place up before it's over, and you know, some said it'll be okay. But there have been a spate of books now trying to integrate us into this history. I know you've seen them, you probably commented on them. There's one called African Founders that talks about, with very specific definition to the Akan, to the Yoruba. Here are the contributions of Africans to this thing called America, this kind of thing. But the possibility of America, it still seems to me that you're talking about something different than what these people are talking about. The conversations you had with our now colleague Nicole Hannah-Jones across the street from y'all with the Black Writers Conference last fall, talking about that, even with the 1619 Project. And I saw a conversation even around Black AF, you all were talking, and she's talking about how they push back against this work. When you write, and here it is on page 345, says, justice demands restitution. And until there are reparations, there can be no justice. Until there are reparations, anyone who pledges their allegiance to the flag that stands for a country with liberty and justice for all is a liar and a thief. Is America possible, the one that you've described? We live in a kind of variant. And if it is, what will have to be the price to pay in order for that to be a reality for people beyond our community?
I think America is possible. And like, I mean, really though, what is crazy about this room and this world we live in? Like when you go outside, this is a thing that we built like it ain't even 50 years old, right? Like when we started, when we got the full opportunity to start on the project,
right,
was 50 years ago, right? And you think about that, right? Like what we did, like what we did with a Constitution, a society, a monetary system, a slate of state laws that said nothing that we thought of mattered, and we grabbed it and made it into this. Like, to me, what's crazy about the whole idea of suppressing Black history, even from the white people's perspective, right? If you just look at what Black people did from 1865 to now, or from 1965 to now, really is the greatest story in the history of this planet, right? Yeah. Like, because we didn't start from scratch. We started with a whole thing that was against us. We started from negative scratch, right? And so, like, to me, it is crazy to say that it, like, justice and freedom will never happen, considering what we have done in this very, very, very short amount of time.
That's true. That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And
That's true.
like I said yesterday, when King said the long arc of the moral universe bends towards justice, but it don't, right? We bend it, right? Like it doesn't just like, it's not, the universe is not moral.
Interesting. Oh, that's interesting. You know why? Because y'all know Mike's partner, your wife and family went with us to Egypt last year. We were there, and I think for us, what we brought to the table was our culture, our politics. It's not the same as it was, of course, but we Africanized that part of. I wouldn't even use democracy or America. I wouldn't say that. I would say we trying to civilize this place to the degree that you want to use civilization. But that's a very particular worldview. Saw yesterday on social media, you tweeted out, or X'd out, or however they call it, our brother Ta-Nehisi Coates' article in Vanity Fair on Palestine and what the mischance the Democrats had. And of course, his book is coming out soon. We had to have him here too. Ta-Nehisi, Jelani Cobb, and them, they said we kind of like agnostic at best, probably atheist. So, but there's a spiritual notion at the center of many African worldviews that would say that it does bend toward. The Egyptians might call it Ma'at, but you're saying it's not no moral universe.
Well, so
I'm asking.
So there is a spirit, a universal connection in human beings.
Okay.
Right? Okay. There's something like to take something from other people as well as a universal moral, right? But the universe will do it to you. Like what makes it, like the reason it is inside us is because the universe is not moral.
Yes, sir.
Right?
I see what you're saying.
Right? Like the lightning does not strike the people who are the worst. Right? Right? So,
interesting.
Right? Like the good people die of hunger and evil people get fat. The world, the universe is not moral. We are moral. And to deny the moral thing in us.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
And the reason that it is inside us is because we can bend.
Yes.
That arc.
Got you.
Right? Because, in other words, if we did not have morality in us, then we would be subject to the lightning and the hunger, right? If we did not have morality in us, the strongest people would get fat and let the weak people die.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the universe don't care.
Got you.
The stronger people wouldn't build a hut so the lightning wouldn't strike.
Interesting.
Right? If they were not moral, right?
That's interesting.
And so the universe is not moral. We create as our duty to each other and to this world is to create a world for ourselves. Now that is a moral universe. And then we have to bend that arc toward justice. But the universe don't care. Right? The rain, just like my mom used to say, it rains on the good and the bad.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Alike.
That's right.
And so I think that when we talk about this country and black people in this country, we bent it to our will. It was not moral.
Yes.
It was an aristocracy. It was a capitalist aristocracy that cared about money, and it specifically removed morals from the equation.
Absolutely.
Right? And we bent it to our will.
That makes a lot of sense. So last question here, and again, I think we got our minds open now thinking about these things. let's end maybe for this round, and then we get in the broader conversation where we started. Because I'm thinking about my aunt now, and that's a whole nother thing. Because you're right, the universe, it reminds me of Howard Thurman saying that human beings try to reduce the thing we see into something we can explain, and that's basically the origin of religion, which is why he couldn't be contained just by Christianity. He had to come with another whole nother suite of names for him. He said, that's us trying to work that out. Let's end this part with your grandmother, because it was her in that tub, right, when they tried to shoot up through the house, if I remember. And there's a lot of humor in this book, of course. I asked about the food and the music, and I'm sure they're gonna leave that to everybody. But you talk about her praying. And you say black people don't pray silently. We gotta pray out loud, right? But she didn't close her eyes. In that moment, in terms of the morality that we make, or the world that we create and hold ourselves to, all those rules that your family imposed on you and your cousins and all that stuff that gave you the moral anchor to raise this analysis of who we are. In that moment that your grandmother and grandfather are there, these cats come looking for, what did you say? Something else. How is the survival of black people beyond just living from day to day, but really an act of growth and self-determination? I don't know if that makes any sense to you, given what I'm referring to here, how your grandmother protected y'all in that tub.
Yeah, so a couple things so what he's talking about is a story in the book where a group of men, my grandfather ran a taxi cab stand, and he had a separate room on the back of the house, and some white men broke into his taxi cab stand with my family there to scare him from picking up white customers. And my grandmother and him, that door still exists at my house. Everybody who over generations has signed that door. So like my friends' grandmother's names are on that door. And my grandmother, but the bullet holes are still there too. And I asked my grandmother, did she think they was gonna, what? I think the quote is, were they going to just, scare you, or you think they're trying to do something else? And she said, something else. But the thing I think is that our existence in this world is simultaneously trying to achieve some kind of protection, and like we have to worry about the day-to-day survival.
No question.
Right? Like this temporary thing of just if I can make it to tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
While also navigating that long arc of history, right? So both things are always on black people's minds, right? So you just think about this, right? Like when your kid reaches for the stove and you pop her hand, you're not popping her hand just because you're mad. You're popping her hand because you don't want her to burn her hand, right? And there's only one way she's going to know how fire works is either to get burned or for someone who she trusts and knows loves her to tell her that you can't do it and you just don't want to experience that. Now, that is how we live every day, right? Like, that is us, right? Like, that is what you do when you tell your child. Like, I remember one day, it was tax time. And so, now you can subtract what you paid for your car registration from your taxes. So I told my son, hey, go get the registration out of the glove compartment. So he goes to the glove compartment and he's fiddling through the glove compartment looking for his registration. And I yell at him, like, what do you mean you can't find your registration? Now, what I imagined is that the only reason he would, besides being getting the tax for me, is the police stopped him.
No question.
And you're fumbling through there and you would die. So, because I know he thinks I hung the moon, so he knows I wasn't yelling at him because he did something stupid. It was because I don't want you to get burned.
No question.
Right? And we're always simultaneously navigating those two realities and working like in that every day. You're trying, like, you can't yell at this man who did this racist microaggression at work. So how do you navigate not having to deal with that trauma every time you go to work and not getting fired?
That's right.
Right? How do you deal with asserting your rights and not getting shot in the face? How do you deal with voting for a genocide, not voting for a genocide,
Right.
and
That's right. Come on now.
not having a white supremacist president whose every policy is going to harm you?
Right.
Every day in America is that reality. Right? Do you let them get burned? Or do you pop them?
Damn.
And I think that as sad as that sounds, like we've become so accustomed to that duality that sometimes we be on the internet yelling at each other. You should have let him pop him. Nah, you let him burn himself or burn on him. Right? Not knowing that it's the fire
Yes.
that is the problem.
It's the fire that's the problem.
Right?
The fire that's the problem.
And
The fire that's the problem.
to me, that is the thing that we're all trying to reckon with within ourselves and with amongst each other.
No question. You know, as you end so many of your threads and social media, and as you end some of the chapters here in the book and vignettes, people think it's about one thing, but it's another thing. And at the end, you say, "This is a story about America." I mean, so it's like, wait, I thought it was about, no, this is about America, the fire. So with that, Chris, I don't know, you want to take one of these microphones? Can we get some folks to, take this one if you don't mind. Thank you, ma'am. All right, folks, time.
We got questions? And when you get the mic, make sure you hold it in the middle, please.
Yeah, which I wouldn't do.
So, anybody got a question?
Question, comment?
Get out of here. Y'all know
Letting
y'all
it
got
digest.
Like this? Yeah. Right. Hi, thank you so much. So I don't know if we can talk about present day, but on Twitter recently, you asked what are some things that the president could do today for Black America? And I know there were a lot of responses, and I'd love to hear, some of the best ones in your opinion, or the most interesting.
So there were a lot of good things, suggestions. When we ask a president, for instance, about reparations, right? Our president can't give us reparations, but it is important also for a president to say, "I support reparations." Like that is because we ain't gonna get reparations tomorrow. But the normalization of the idea that America owes a system of justice or a piece of justice that we won't even talk about is wild. Until we acknowledge that, it's important to acknowledge that. Like a president can't pass legislation, right? But a president saying, "I support this legislation" is important. A president can't, like Kamala Harris can't stop Benjamin Netanyahu from dropping bombs on Palestine. But President Biden can say, "Stop dropping bombs on innocent people in Palestine." It's probably more important than any piece of diplomacy that he could do. So the thing is, right, like what we want from a president sometimes ain't even what the president can do. Is sometimes what he can say, sometimes how the president moves America. Now, one of the, some of my favorites, so there's some actual good policies in there. One of the things I've been wanting to do, man, is this is an idea I've been floating for a year. I want a court. Right, so you think about this, right? When they want to strike down affirmative action, they don't just shop for someone who has standing, someone who can find. They try to find the court, the simplest, the court that most agrees, the most conservative court. If it's
shop,
right,
no question. Which judge? That's right.
Right.
That's right.
That's how they knock down affirmative action. That's how they knock down abortion.
No question.
What if we, like, some of those courts, some of those lower circuit courts, like, you could do it, like, they have 3-4 black judges. Like, why isn't there one black district court that we could shop to? Right? Like, an appeals court might undo it, or maybe not, right? Or maybe it's an appeals court. But that precedent exists in the law now.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Right? And a president can do that. Right?
And did it before.
Right.
Tuttle in the South. I mean, when you talk about Browder versus Gator.
Browder versus Gator.
Yeah, that's right. The judge, that's a
right
good point.
And so, in many of these courts, and when I say a black court, what we have to understand is when we're talking about, like, this is the most conservative court in the country, this conservative district, they're talking about a white court.
No question.
Right? So we just want one.
That's right.
Right? A president can do that, and they couldn't have, because you can get, like, what's interesting about the legal arguments that buttress many of the arguments that we make, the progressive arguments, the black arguments, is that, like, they're generally agreed upon by a wide berth of legal scholars. It's not like black people have some kind of very narrow interpretation of the Constitution and the law, right? Like, it's usually the generally agreed upon, right? Like, everybody agreed that segregation was unconstitutional. It was just like we had to get it through all of the white people and then get it to a court. Once we had it to a court, like, Thurgood Marshall was a brilliant man, but, like, it was kind of a slam dunk case, right? Like,
right at that time,
right?
For sure.
And so,
interesting.
So,
yeah,
what we're fighting against is all of those white courts, because, like, the legal, like, you can just appoint anybody who is just unafraid to really interpret the law as it should be interpreted.
That's true.
It ain't acting like some pro-black, like, we don't want, like, we're not asking to put Dr. Umar on the Supreme Court. We're just asking to put,
absolutely not. Definitely not asking.
We just put, like, regular jury. We just want a court that we can shop to just like they shop.
Right. Now I say that too real. I'm not gonna have to fight Umar this time myself.
Yeah.
So
Hello, thank you for putting on this event. I just really quickly wanted to say that I was homeschooled as well. My mom is right over there, my teacher. But the question that I had was regarding Twitter. Just, do you find that it's a lot more difficult these days to, like, combat the spread of misinformation on there? Because we know Elon Musk just likes chaos and allows a lot of stuff to be on that platform that was not in the past, in a lot of ways. So do you find that in the work that you do, that it's harder to combat the misinformation, or, like, how do you navigate that?
So, I don't know, because, like, I don't think there's a larger number of stupid people in the world, right?
right.
It is just that, like there ain't no stupid font, right? Like, their thing is in the same font as the person who's right. But, like, because I'm in a lucky space where, like, all of my colleagues and a lot of the people I know send me stuff, I don't have to look on Twitter through this. I don't have to sift through the stupid stuff. Like most of the stuff I read on Twitter are tweets somebody sent me, said, "Did you see this thing that's happening?" Or did you see this article? So it's not like I'm scrolling through social media. But I also have a theory that we're at a point in history. Like, I know we like to think that of the technological advancement. We might be at a point in history where we consume more of dumb people's ideas than at any time in human history. Like just think about it. Like, when could you read the thoughts of dumb people before 10 years ago?
That's right.
Right? And so,
That's right.
like, the idea of Twitter is misinformation, right? And so, it depends on how you use it, right? If you use it as a news source, you're probably gonna see a lot of misinformation, right? But if you use it if you understand that it is a gathering of a wide berth of people, and there are some smart people, and if you know those smart people, and you say, "Oh yeah, I wonder what those smart people think about this thing that I don't have enough information on," and they point you to the resources that they looked at, then it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Right? But I think what I'm saying is getting ideas off of Twitter versus getting directions and sources off of Twitter are two different things.
I took that picture right away because you know who did that famously. People would send him stuff. That guy over your shoulder, Dick Gregory. So that's the same thing. You ain't gotta go look. They're gonna keep you and stuff.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My question is, based on the history that you've thoroughly researched and synthesized in your current engagement with events that are happening right now, I really appreciate what you said about imagination, about possibility, and that Black people, we done it first. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what is November 6th, November 7th, November 8th? What do you imagine is possible? What do you imagine that we're doing first, no matter what the particular outcome of this election is?
So, whatever the outcome will be, and I'm not going to predict. So I'll say this: I will predict, right?
Okay.
Mathematically, I really didn't see how Joe Biden was going to lose, right? Like, when you look at the specific numbers and this, because it's really like 8 states really that matter, right? And if you look at the specific numbers, the only way Trump could win is, see, what we talk about Black voters all the time, but like a large percentage of white voters are moving away from Trump. We don't talk about that. White male voters, like you like Trump increased his percentage among white women voters from 2016 to 2020, but lost white male voters. And we never talk about that though, because like white people are suburban dads and soccer moms. They're not Black voters, like, you know, we Black voters, like they euphemize. But I do think whatever happens, we determine the outcome of the election. If we go out, like, we control our own destiny. If we go out and do what we're supposed to do and stay politically engaged, then Trump can't win. He can't. It's like mathematically impossible, right? And so it's up to Black people. Now, the thing is, if Kamala Harris wins, what I imagine is there's going to be first of all, it's going to be a big backlash.
No question.
Right.
No question
Like,
about
there's going to be the backlash. Like, do you think Trump was a backlash? But the other thing is, what Barack Obama was, like, by electing Barack Obama, it was kind of like an experiment. It was like a one-off thing, right? Like, but Kamala, they were not going to make Kamala Harris president.
No, they were not.
Or the presidential nominee, right?
That's right.
Like it was that they knew, like we are the reason she is the
Yeah, the
dominant.
sisters started.
Right. Like they knew
That's right.
what would happen if she did. And I am hopeful that we will realize that political power and weaponize it. And when I say weaponize it, I mean weaponize it against the things that have been weaponized against us, right? I think, right, Kamala knows it, first of all. That's the thing, right? Like previous Democratic presidents could kind of ignore or sideline the most loyal constituency. But I think Kamala knows it. And the other thing is, right, she knows that it won't even last for re-election unless she does something for her most loyal base.
No question.
So I hope we weaponize it. Like, so the thing is, we keep talking. Like, we've all heard people say, "Well, you know, voting don't change things," and I was like, "Yeah, but like, it ain't voting. It's political engagement. Voting is the first step."
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Right. Like, learning how to ride a bicycle don't get you nowhere. It's pedaling every day, or pedaling to a place that gets you somewhere. So I'm hoping that we will realize that political power that we have, because I mean the rest of the country, when you talk about white women, is basically 50-50. White men are coming close to being 50-50, and we, just like their swing states now, we are what determines the political narrative. Joe Biden couldn't have been president without the black vote in South Carolina. Kamala Harris could have been the nominee, and they recognize that power. I'm hoping that we do.
Very powerful, very powerful. Chris, I think somebody back there. Oh, somebody. Yeah. Okay. No, you running. I'm tripping.
Hi, good night. Loved the book. I read many portions of it to my family while I was reading it. And I had a library copy. It was great. What set of people do you wish that book would be in the hands of 10, 20 years from now? If you choose, like, what set of people?
So, like I was telling Dr. Carr earlier, like nobody told me to read before the Mayflower. I was just like a 10, 12-year-old kid browsing on bookshelves at my family's house, and picked it up and started reading it. And so what I hope is, like 20 years from now, even if some of you hadn't read it, it's on your bookshelf, and your son or your grandson or your great grandson is like, "What is Black AF history?" and opens it, and he might open it to the middle, and the storytelling, and like I'm hoping it'll still sound like his uncles are telling him a story, or his aunts or his grandparents are telling him a story, and that's whose hands I hope it comes into, because like I know we like to think that like the more we learn about ourselves, like we pass it on, but it's cyclical, man. Like sometimes we're interested in Black history, sometimes we ain't, right? And sometimes 3 years ago, this country was about racial justice after George Floyd, and then it was like, nah, we ain't gonna do it anymore. That's good. We good now. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's right.
So that's what I hope.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you for taking the time to meet here at Sankofa. I've been following you on the Griot, and I'd love to hear some of your wisdom. I sort of been watching the convention this week, could only stomach it up to a certain point with the freedom song, freedom, 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 and I was wondering what the hell are they talking about? But at the same time, everybody thanking Biden, and I knew who Biden was. I always think about Strom Thurmond being his mentor and a lot of other things. So a lot of black people in that audience, and I can't figure out how, speaking of George Floyd and everything that's happened, not 10 years ago, I mean, just recently, the Palestine situation where, you know, folks are just being murdered, and black Palestinians too. And we have so many African Americans out there heralding and yay, you know, for Kamala. And then she genuflected towards, you know, the oath everybody has to give to Israel. So I guess my question is, you know, when you talk about us having the power to do so many things and we're the ones that move democracy forward, I'm kind of perplexed in thinking like, well, why are we always have amnesia when it comes to, you know, not just foreign policy, because it relates to us as well. The starving people in Sudan, Why is it that, you know, is it a lack of courage? What is it?
So there's a couple of things, right? First of all, let's be clear, like what you're talking about is the show, right? Like there is politics and there is the show, right? Like what we saw last week was the show, right? Like, that's not the place for policy. That's not the place for, you know, real political engagement. Those are the fans of the Democratic Party convening in a place to get, to make people look. That's what it's for, right? And from 8 o'clock, like after they write the like we don't, there's no cameras in the room when they're writing the platform of the Democratic Party, right? Because you're not gonna watch that, right? There's no cameras in the room when they're debating foreign policy, because you ain't gonna watch that, right? But at 8 o'clock, from 8 o'clock to 12 o'clock, they have a show to make sure that there's some people who are gonna come back in 4 years or every year or tomorrow and write the policy and debate the foreign policy and vote for the things and protect women's reproductive rights and protect, you know, try to reform police, right? And sometimes that requires a show. Now, here's the thing, right? I don't think it is often amnesia. See, I think there's a misconception of when you see the black people who were, you know, engaged with the Democratic Party, there is this misconception like they are uncritical, like they don't see the nuances that you see. When they do, like, I don't know any of those people that don't have specific criticisms of the Democratic Party, the same as one that we have. Like we are not blindly loyal to the Democratic Party. We see the flaws, right? And we make a judgment, because here's the other thing. The choice is to let white people choose, right? Like that's the only, like either you engage, because in a two-party system, it's a binary choice, right? We get a voice in who the nominee is going to be, and then once there's a nominee, the choice is binary, and you either choose one of those two options or let white people choose, right? And the idea that the black people, one, aren't as smart as the white people who are using them, or the people who came up with the foreign policy, or the people who write the platform, is absurd, right? Because again, look at where the Democratic Party was 50 years ago to now. Is because of black people, right? Like all those policies you're talking about is because of black people. Now, here is a question that none of us can answer, right? Because I too agree with you on Palestine, and I can understand why they wouldn't even platform those people. Like there is no legitimate reason not to. Is no like it ain't Israel that's stopping them, right?
And they
because they don't need like
that's right.
I mean, it's crazy to say this, but right now, Kamala Harris don't need no Israel money, right? Like she got more money than she can spend, really, on a campaign. So it ain't the money, right? It ain't the foreign. Like it's complex. The position of Israel and where it is in the globe is complex. But here's the thing. Here's a question that we can ask ourselves: what if the only thing that could stop negotiations for a ceasefire is for Biden or Kamala Harris to say Netanyahu? Because I mean, this proud, essentially white man, like,
He went to high school in Philadelphia. They need to send him back.
Right, but what I'm saying is, what if just getting up there and saying it for these people who are pressuring the Democratic Party actually obstructed negotiations for a ceasefire? I don't know if that is true, but I don't see other logical explanation for, because it ain't the money. Right? Our absurd foreign policy obsession with Israel is not just like because of like this Jewish cabal that we all like to imagine. There are legitimate geopolitical reasons for it. Some of it is because of political money and influence here. Some of it is because of a geopolitical reality.
No question.
Right, a geopolitical reality
state.
of like,
No
I mean,
question.
that's the only white state in the Middle East. Like we like to call it democracy, but I'm saying it's the only white state in the Middle East. They're not gonna let the Middle East, like, and then like we're not gonna have an all-out war where our oil prices, like America is dependent on oil prices, and we just ain't gonna let the entire oil-producing countries have self-determination without some intercessory country in that area. It's very complex, but what I will say is that ultimately the idea that all those black people are puppets of the white people is crazy, considering what that party is what the ideas that black people gave it. And sometimes to get them white people on board, you gotta dance a little bit. Right? Like I mean, I'm not saying shuck and jive, but what I'm saying is we know that some of them white people ain't gonna listen unless, you know, maybe like just people who are not engaged politically sometimes need a prompt. Like you can't get a 17-year-old kid to watch, you know, a rally unless you fool them that Beyonce gonna be there. Right? So,
right.
I think we can criticize the Democratic Party, and we should, because that's what pushes it towards the way we want it to be. While we gotta stop acting like the black people dumb and the white people smart and they just playing with us, because it ain't that way.
That's right. So we gotta get to signing some books. So
yes, thank y'all. We're gonna have one. Y'all can stay up here.
He's the east
Yeah,
side.
exactly. But you know everyone's gonna want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I'll get out the way. See,
y'all
can I
up
see
here.
for a minute, Chris, just for a second? I wanted to. No, sorry, you keep that one. I'm gonna get this back to Chris, but I want to say this just very quickly, because even though the book now on a year has come out, you coming here is like homecoming. And so, you know, we
I've been
want.
wanting to come here for so long.
Wait a minute, say, what?
I've been wanting to come here for so long.
Oh, yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about. Listen, Chris, thank you for putting this together. Because, like I said, we were overseas, and then you reached out to her and said, you know, we want to do this.
Yeah, and anytime Dr. Carr can do it, I'm there.
Oh, no.
She's like, but when you want, just tell me when you can do it, and I'm going to be
Listen,
listening.
brother.
Like, no, he said this day.
I know.
Now, can you do this day?
Okay. Listen,
all right.
look, it's an honor to be here with you, brother. And it's a lot of people in here. Mike is from the beginning a fundamental, foundational supporter of Nubia and Narrative, the learning platform we use. So just know, when Karen talks about him, there are a lot of people. The sister asked you a question, Jessica Rucker is master teacher with Teacher for Change and the Howard Zen Project. A lot of folks. You brought Tiffany Cross and Wesley Lowery in with you from Native Land Podcast and New York Times and all that. I'm saying that everybody here, this community is so important. So to have you here talking about this book at this time with the work that you are doing is a historical moment. I just wanted to recognize that, brother, and thank you for coming with us. You know what I'm saying?
Thank you so much for coming out tonight. If you want to buy books, there are plenty for sale. You know, if you haven't bought your book, Black AF yet, we still got plenty back there for sale as well. If you want to get your book signed, you got to start a line right over here.
You got a pen?
And we will grab a
Wait a minute.
pen.
I heard excuse me. That's hiding.
Hold on. I wasn't done.
Just give us for a second.
I wasn't done. Y'all real eager beavers. We also have more announcements.
Yeah, we don't want to let you get away without hearing
What we doing?
our story here.
That's right.
Maritu.
Yes.
Hello? Maritu, come please. Abel, go replace her for the Maritu, come here. Excuse me, you also have to know one thing. It will not be soon. You will have a place here. We're building. My wife is working hard to build an auditorium of a decent size where all of you would be accommodated. And so this is just a temporary Palestinian tent. And so be just in touch with us, leave us your email address, keep communicating with us. We'll have a base for intellectual discourse like the one you just experienced. We bring filmmakers, we show filmmakers, we bring African filmmakers, African American filmmakers, Latin American filmmakers, etc. We're going to show a Palestinian important film and you will hear it from the announcement. So do not just keep us abreast. When you can make it, please help us be here. You talk about gentrification, we're not immune of that. We fight every day to stay in this place.
Thank you all so much for coming out. This was fantastic. This was amazing. The energy was amazing. So I just want to say thank you, each and every one of you, for being here. I'm not gonna take too long. We have a lot of events. If you can check out our website, you'll be able to see everything. It's www.sankofa.com. But I'm gonna run through some of the events that we have coming up soon. Friday, we have Jazz Night with David White and Edge Theory. For those of you who don't know David White, he's a Howard University graduate. He also did the soundtrack music for the film Sankofa and Through the Door of No Return, which is Shamikiana Garima's film. So he will be here. We try and have it bi-weekly, but yes, so coming up, August 30th, if you want tickets, you can go to the website and register. We also have September 1st, Gaza on Our Mind. That's a space created by Haile Garima for any artists to be able to join us and show their solidarity with the people of Palestine. You can sign up to perform poetry, read poetry, sing anything. The floor is yours. And also we collect donations that day for WPFW radio station, who has been in the front lines making sure that they are reporting on what is going on, not only in Palestine, but anywhere where genocide exists in the world. So we want to show our support and solidarity with them as well. So we will be having that event. That is a bi-weekly event. On September 14th, at the same God's Out Our Mind gathering, we will have a panel discussion, and we will be screening a Palestinian filmmaker by the name of Michelle Kafil, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. The film is called Malul Celebrates Its Destruction. It's a